Close your eyes for a second. Picture a casino floor. Not the one from the movies. The real thing, 2 in the morning. The carpet beneath your feet is that deep, hypnotic pattern designed to hide every stain, every spilled drink, every dropped chip from decades of dreamers who came here believing tonight would be different. The air is cold, artificially cold, pumped through vents laced with that signature scent. You know the one. That cocktail of oxygen and manufactured excitement designed to keep you awake, keep you playing, keep you reaching for your wallet just one more time. The slot machines are singing, that endless digital chorus, bells and chimes, and the mechanical heartbeat of coins that don't exist anymore. The lights are blazing, always blazing, because in Vegas there is no night, there is no morning, there is only now, only the next bet, only the next hand. Now open your eyes and count the empty chairs. 1, 2, 10, 30. An entire blackjack pit with dealers standing at attention behind pristine felt tables where no one is sitting. Roulette wheels spinning for an audience of ghosts. A craps table so silent you can hear the dice hit the felt like a funeral drum. This isn't a slow Tuesday in February. This is Saturday night. This is supposed to be the peak, the crush, the moment when every square foot of this building should be generating money. But instead, there's something else happening here, something the neon lights can't hide. This casino is bleeding, and I don't mean metaphorically. I mean $500,000 every single day. Before the sun comes up, before the first tourist stumbles down for their overpriced buffet breakfast, before a single card is dealt, $500,000 gone. Not from bad bets, not from some high roller who got lucky. This isn't gambling losses. This is operational hemorrhaging, the raw cost of keeping this machine running when nobody wants to use it. Let me break that down for you. $500,000 a day means $20,000 an hour, $333 every single minute, $5.50 clicking away every second you're watching this video. The electricity bill alone for a major strip casino can hit $400,000 a month. That's just to keep the lights on, the slots humming, the air conditioning fighting against a desert that wants to cook everything inside at 115 degrees. Then there's payroll. Even with the cuts, even with the slashed hours and the gutted benefits, you still need bodies, dealers, security, housekeeping, maintenance crews keeping the fountains running and the elevators moving and the illusion intact. Insurance, licensing fees, the constant churn of marketing dollars trying to convince people that Vegas is still worth the trip. Add it all up, and you get a number that should be impossible. A number that says this building, this temple of excess and excitement, and the American dream of striking it rich is now a monument to slow-motion financial suicide. I talked to a floor manager, 22 years in the industry. He asked me not to use his name, asked me not to say which property, because he still needs this job, even if this job is killing him. He told me something I haven't been able to shake. He said, "Every morning I walk through those doors knowing we're going to lose. The only question is, how much? We're not trying to win anymore, we're just trying to survive until tomorrow." Survive until tomorrow. That's the new Vegas motto. Not what happens here stays here. Not the entertainment capital of the world. Survive until tomorrow. But here's what should terrify you. This casino, the one hemorrhaging $500,000 every 24 hours. The one with empty tables and desperate managers and workers who don't know if they'll have a job next month. This isn't the worst performing property on the strip. It's not even close. This is the success story. This is the one the executives point to in board meetings and say, "See, we're managing the downturn." Because down the road, a few blocks away, behind the facades of other legendary names you'd recognize instantly, the bleeding is worse. So much worse. In 2019, Las Vegas welcomed nearly 42 million visitors. 42 million people who came here to spend money, lose money, and feel alive while doing it. The casinos weren't just profitable, they were printing cash. Rivers of revenue flowing through these buildings like the air conditioning they pumped through the vents. That was the peak. That was the moment right before the fall. Because today, in 2025, that number has collapsed. 19.6 million, less than half of what it was. And the trend line isn't flattening, it's not stabilizing, it's accelerating downward. Revenue down 40% from the peak. Operating costs up 22% because everything costs more now. Energy, labor, insurance. The price of maintaining the fantasy climbs while the audience for that fantasy disappears. Do the math. Actually, don't, because the math doesn't work. The math hasn't worked for 3 years. The math is a screaming alarm that everyone in a corner office heard and chose to ignore. And now here we are, MGM Resorts, the biggest name on the Strip. Their earnings reports read like a horror story written in spreadsheet form. Revenue per available room sliding, casino revenue cratering. The language getting more creative each quarter as they try to spin decline into strategic repositioning. Caesars Entertainment, $12 billion in debt. $12 billion. That's not a typo. That's a weight around the neck of an empire that used to define what Las Vegas meant to the world. Wynn, Boyd Gaming, Station Casinos. Every single major player watching the same numbers, attending the same emergency meetings, having the same whispered conversations about which property closes first. Because someone has to be first. Someone has to be the name in the headline, the domino that tips. The moment when struggling becomes shuttered and a building that once symbolized unlimited possibility becomes another cautionary tale. The old-timers remember when a casino closing was unthinkable, when the worst that could happen was a rebrand, a new coat of paint, a different theme, but the machine kept running. That faith is gone now. I stood on the Strip last month, middle of the afternoon, and I watched tourists walk past entrances that used to pull them in like gravity. They glanced at the doors, checked their phones, and kept walking. The spell is broken. The magic trick doesn't work anymore. And $500,000 keeps burning. Every day. While the executives who built this disaster sit in offices wondering how much longer they can keep the lights on. But here's the thing. Those executives, the ones watching these numbers spiral, the ones approving the layoffs and the hour cuts and the service reductions that make the experience worse and drive even more visitors away. They saw this coming, not months ago, not even a year ago, 5 years ago. They had the data, they had the projections. They knew exactly what would happen if they made the choices they made. And they did it anyway. What they chose to do instead, the strategy they bet everything on, the philosophy that seems so clever in the boardroom and is now strangling everything it touches. That's where this story turns from tragedy into something unforgivable. And that's exactly where we're going next. There's a word that gets thrown around in corporate boardrooms. A word that sounds smart, sophisticated. The kind of word that makes executives nod at each other across a mahogany table like they've just discovered fire. Premiumization. Say it out loud. Feel how it rolls off the tongue. It sounds like progress, like evolution, like the natural next step for a business that wants to grow. But let me tell you what premiumization actually means. It means charging you $40 for a parking spot that was free for 50 years. It means a resort fee of $60 a night for a gym you'll never use and Wi-Fi that should have been included since 2007. It means a beer that costs $15 and a blackjack table with a $50 minimum where there used to be a $10 seat waiting for you. Premiumization is a fancy word for extraction, for squeezing, for looking at a loyal customer who came back year after year and asking one simple question: how much more can we take from them before they break? And here's the thing, it worked. For exactly 18 months, it worked beautifully. When Vegas reopened after COVID, the casinos didn't just raise prices, they fundamentally transformed the entire economic model of the Strip. Fewer tables, fewer dealers, fewer services, but dramatically higher prices for everything that remained. The logic seemed airtight. If we can't have 40 million visitors, we'll have 20 million visitors who each spend twice as much. The math balances. The shareholders stay happy. The quarterly reports look green instead of red. And for a minute, a brief, golden, delusional minute, it actually played out that way. Visitors who had been locked inside for a year came flooding back, desperate for experience, hungry for stimulation, willing to pay whatever number appeared on the bill because they were just so grateful to be somewhere, anywhere, doing something that felt alive. Vegas posted record revenue per visitor in 2022. The executives took their bonuses. Wall Street applauded, and nobody, not one person in a position of power, stopped to ask the only question that mattered. Will they come back? Because here's what the spreadsheets don't capture. Here's what the algorithms can't model. Here's what every single person in that boardroom should have known in their bones if they'd ever actually stood on a casino floor and watched real people make real decisions. Vegas was never about one trip. Vegas was about the return. The magic of this city was built on repetition. on the bachelor party that became an annual reunion, on the couple who came for their honeymoon and then every anniversary after, on the regular who saved up all year for 4 days in the desert because those 4 days made the other 361 worth grinding through. That rhythm, that loyalty, that almost religious devotion to returning, that was the engine. And premiumization didn't just damage that engine, it ripped it out completely. The numbers are devastating. In 2019, the repeat visitor rate for Las Vegas was 62%. That means nearly 2/3 of everyone who came had been here before, knew what to expect, loved it enough to return. In 2025, that number has collapsed to 41%, a 34% drop in the people who used to be automatic, guaranteed. The bedrock of every projection and every budget and every assumption about how this city would survive, they're gone. Not because they stopped wanting to come, because they came once under the new model and swore they would never come back. I've read hundreds of testimonials, forum posts, Reddit threads, review sites where people pour out their frustration in paragraphs that read like breakup letters. The same themes emerge over and over. I felt like a mark, not a guest. They nickel and dimed us on everything. By the end, I was angry, not relaxed. We used to go twice a year, now we're trying Cancun. It's not fun anymore, it's just expensive. That last one hits different. It's not fun anymore. 4 words that should be carved into the desk of every executive who championed this strategy, who looked at the golden goose and decided to butcher it for one spectacular meal instead of collecting eggs for another 50 years. They called it premiumization, but there's a more accurate word for what they actually built. A trap. And now they're the ones caught in it. Because here's the brutal reality that nobody in a quarterly earnings call wants to admit. A casino is not like other businesses. A restaurant can cut staff when customers disappear. A retail store can shrink its footprint. A tech company can go remote and slash its overhead to almost nothing. But a casino? A casino is a machine. A massive, sprawling, impossibly complex machine that costs almost the same to operate whether it's packed or empty. Think about it. The building doesn't get smaller when the crowds thin out. The square footage stays the same. The air conditioning still has to fight the desert. The elevators still need to run. The lights still blaze because a dark casino is a dead casino, and dead casinos don't attract the few customers who are still willing to walk through the door. Security doesn't scale down proportionally. You can't have half the guards watching a half-empty floor. The liability stays the same. The insurance requirements stay the same. The threats stay the same. Maintenance is relentless. Slot machines break whether anyone's playing them or not. Carpets wear, plumbing fails. The desert wants to reclaim every building, and keeping it at bay costs money every single day. This is what economists call fixed cost structure. And in the casino industry, the fixed costs are absolutely brutal. That $500,000 a day we talked about, the one hemorrhaging out of a single property, let me show you where it goes. Electricity and utilities, $80,000 a day. You could run a small town on what it takes to keep one casino lit and cooled and functional. Base payroll, even after the cuts, even after the layoffs and the hour reductions that have gutted the workforce. $200,000 a day minimum just to have bodies in the building. Debt service. We'll get deeper into this nightmare later, but for now, just know that a significant chunk of every day's burn is just interest payments. Money that doesn't improve the property, doesn't enhance the experience, just keeps the banks from seizing the building. Insurance, licensing, contractual obligations that can't be renegotiated without triggering penalties worse than the payments themselves. Add it up, and you get a machine that costs nearly the same to run at 30% capacity as it does at 90%. Which means when the crowds disappear, the math doesn't just get bad, it becomes impossible. I talked to someone in senior management, different property, same story. Asked me 3 times to confirm this was anonymous before they'd say a word. They told me about the meetings, the ones that happen behind closed doors now, weekly, sometimes more. They said, we run the models every week, and every week the models tell us the same thing. We're too big to operate efficiently and too leveraged to shrink. We're spending money we don't have to maintain a fantasy nobody's buying anymore. Too big to operate, too leveraged to shrink. That's not a business strategy. That's a death spiral with a gift shop. And here's where it gets even darker. You might be thinking the obvious solution, the one that any rational person would try. Just lower the prices. If premiumization killed demand, then reverse it. Bring back the $10 blackjack tables, drop the resort fees, make parking free again. Return to the model that worked for decades. Wouldn't that bring people back? Wouldn't that restart the engine? It seems so simple, so obvious. And every single executive in Vegas knows it would be suicide. Not might be, would be, with mathematical certainty, because the prices can't come down. They're not high because of greed anymore. I mean, greed built the trap. Greed designed every dollar of this disaster. But at this point, the prices are high because they have to be. Because lowering them wouldn't save the casinos. It would accelerate their destruction. And the reason why? The financial time bomb ticking underneath every glittering tower on the Strip. That's the darkest chapter of this entire story. And it starts with a number so large it almost doesn't feel real. $12 billion. That's not a typo. That's not an exaggeration for effect. $12 billion is the amount of debt currently wrapped around the neck of Caesars Entertainment, one of the most iconic names in gambling history. The company that owns the Palace, the Forum Shops, half the billboards on the Strip. $12 billion. Let that number sink in for a second. If you stacked 12 billion $1 bills on top of each other, the pile would reach over 800 miles into the sky. Past the atmosphere, past the International Space Station, into the void of space itself. That's how much Caesars owes. And they're not even the most leveraged player on the Strip. MGM Resorts, the company behind the Bellagio, the Aria, the MGM Grand itself. They're carrying over $30 billion in total liabilities. Not all of it traditional debt. Some of it sale-leaseback arrangements that look cleaner on paper but function exactly the same way. Money owed, interest accruing, payments due whether the customers show up or not. Wynn Resorts, $8 billion in long-term debt. The entire Las Vegas casino industry is sitting on a combined debt load that exceeds $60 billion. $60 billion. And here's the part that should make your stomach drop. That debt wasn't taken on to survive hard times. It was taken on during the good times, the best times. This is the part of the story where we need to talk about private equity, about leveraged buyouts, about a financial strategy that has hollowed out industry after industry in America and is now completing its masterwork on the Las Vegas Strip. Here's how it works. A private equity firm identifies a profitable company, a company with real assets, real cash flow, real value built over decades. They buy that company, but they don't use their own money, not most of it anyway. They use debt. They load the company itself with billions in loans, use those loans to fund the purchase, and then sit back as the company they just bought is forced to make the payments on the debt that was used to acquire it. It's like buying someone's house, putting the mortgage in their name, and then collecting rent from them to cover payments on a loan they never asked for. This is what happened to Caesars. In 2008, right before the financial crisis, private equity giants Apollo Global Management and TPG Capital executed one of the largest leveraged buyouts in history. Nearly $30 billion to take Caesars private. And where did that $30 billion come from? Debt, piled onto the company like sandbags on a sinking ship. The plan was simple: load it up, extract fees, extract dividends, and when the music stops, file for bankruptcy and let someone else clean up the mess. Caesars filed for bankruptcy in 2015. But here's the thing about casino bankruptcies: the buildings don't disappear. The slot machines don't evaporate. The debt gets restructured, renegotiated, passed from one set of hands to another like a toxic asset in a game of financial hot potato. And when Caesars emerged from bankruptcy, they weren't free. They were just carrying a slightly lighter version of the same impossible burden. $12 billion lighter than before. But still, $12 billion more than any company can sustainably service when revenues are collapsing and customers are fleeing to Cancun. This is the trap. This is why the prices can't come down. Every dollar of revenue that comes through those casino doors has to be split, and the debt holders get paid first. Before the workers, before the maintenance, before the improvements that might actually bring customers back. The interest payments are relentless. Caesars pays over $1 billion a year just in interest, not principal, not paying down what they owe, just the cost of owing it. $1 billion a year flowing out of the company into the pockets of bondholders and banks. Gone forever. Now do the math. If you lower prices, revenue drops. If revenue drops, You can't make the interest payments. If you can't make the interest payments, you default. If you default, the bondholders seize control, and the first thing new ownership does in a restructuring is slash everything to the bone to protect their position. But if you keep prices high, customers keep leaving. If customers keep leaving, revenue drops anyway, and you end up in exactly the same place. Default, seizure, collapse. There is no door, number 3. There is no strategy that fixes this. The debt has become a self-fulfilling prophecy of destruction, created during the boom, weaponized by private equity, and now strangling every attempt to adapt to a world that has fundamentally changed. I want to tell you about an earnings call from last year. I'm not going to name the company, but you'd recognize it. Everyone would. An analyst asked the CEO directly, point blank, "How do you plan to address the debt load given current revenue trends?" There was a pause. 4 seconds of dead air, which in an earnings call might as well be an eternity. And then the CEO said something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. He said, "We remain confident in our ability to manage our capital structure through this transitional period." Manage our capital structure through this transitional period. That's not an answer. That's a prayer dressed up in a suit. Because there is no management strategy for a capital structure that was designed for 40 million visitors when you're getting 19. There's only delay. And the clock is ticking. When I talk to people inside these companies, the ones who see the real numbers, the ones who sit in the meetings where the spreadsheets come out and the doors close, they all say the same thing. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, and who goes first. Because when one of these giants finally buckles, when the interest payment comes due and the cash isn't there and the lawyers start circling, it won't be contained. It won't be one casino closing its doors while the others keep humming along. The Las Vegas Strip is an ecosystem, and ecosystems don't experience isolated failures. Think about how these properties are connected. The same companies supply linens to half the hotels on the Strip. The same food service contractors run kitchens across multiple casinos. The same staffing agencies provide dealers and servers and housekeepers who work at different properties depending on the shift. When one major casino defaults, those vendors don't get paid. And vendors who don't get paid can't provide services to anyone else. The linen company that loses its biggest contract can't fulfill orders for the others. The food supplier who takes a 7-figure loss has to cut corners somewhere. The staffing agency that suddenly has half its workforce unemployed floods the market with desperate people willing to work for less. This is called contagion, and it's exactly what happened in 2008. Not in casinos, in housing. But the mechanics are identical. One bank fails, exposing another bank's bad bets, which triggers a run on a third bank, which freezes credit markets, which collapses businesses that had nothing to do with the original failure but suddenly can't get the loans they need to make payroll. We saw what that looked like. We lived through it. And the people who were supposed to learn from it, the regulators, the executives, the private equity firms who picked through the wreckage and bought everything at pennies on the dollar. They didn't learn, they just moved to a different industry. And now, here we are, watching the same script play out in a different city. But wait, it gets worse. Because the debt bomb isn't just sitting underneath the casinos. It's wired into the entire city of Las Vegas. The municipal government runs on gaming revenue, property taxes, sales taxes, gaming taxes, license fees, all of it built on projections that assume the good times would last forever. The state of Nevada collects nearly $1 billion a year in gaming taxes alone. That money funds schools, roads, police departments, social services that catch people when they fall. What happens to those services when the tax base craters? What happens to the schools when the casinos that fund them go dark? What happens to the city itself when the institutions that hold it together lose their primary source of income? I'll tell you what happens. What already happened in Detroit. What already happened in dozens of American cities that built their entire identity around a single industry and then watched that industry abandon them. Decay. Collapse. A slow bleeding out that takes decades to complete and generations to recover from, if recovery comes at all. And here's the question that keeps me up at night. Everyone sees this coming. The executives see it, the city officials see it, the unions see it, the workers who keep showing up to jobs that might not exist next month see it. Everyone knows the math doesn't work. So why isn't anyone doing anything? Why isn't there a plan? Why are we all just watching this slow-motion car crash and pretending it's not happening? The answer is brutal. The answer is that the people who could do something have already done their math, and their math says it's cheaper to let it collapse. Cheaper to extract what's left, take the bonuses while they're still flowing, and be somewhere else when the bill comes due. That's the calculation. That's the strategy. Delay, extract, escape. And the people who can't escape? The ones without stock options or golden parachutes or vacation homes in Montana? The dealers and the housekeepers and the bartenders and the cooks who gave their lives to this city? They're not part of the calculation. They never were. $500,000 a day, bleeding out of a single casino, interest payments flowing to bondholders who've never set foot on the Strip, executives managing their capital structure through this transitional period. But the real catastrophe isn't in the boardrooms. It's not in the balance sheets, or the earnings calls, or the restructuring negotiations happening in law offices 1,000 miles away. The real catastrophe is 3 miles from the Strip, in neighborhoods the tourists never see, where the people who actually built Las Vegas, who dealt the cards and made the beds and mixed the drinks and smiled at every guest for 30 years, where those people are being erased, one layoff at a time, one eviction at a time, one dream dying at a time, and no one. Not the executives, not the private equity firms, not the city officials who built their budgets on fantasy. No one is coming to save them. Her name is Maria. I'm not gonna tell you her last name. She asked me not to. Asked me 3 times actually, because even now, even after everything, she's afraid. Afraid of losing what little she has left. Maria has been a housekeeper on the Las Vegas Strip for 23 years. 23 years. She started in 2002, back when the Bellagio was still the newest thing on the Strip, back when a hard worker could build a life in this city, buy a house, raise kids, believe that tomorrow would be better than today. For 2 decades, she made beds, scrubbed bathrooms, vacuumed carpets in rooms that cost more per night than she made in a week. And she was proud of it. Proud of the calluses on her hands, proud of the Employee of the Month awards, proud that her daughter was going to be the first in their family to go to college. That was before the cuts. Before the hours went from 40 a week to 24. Before the health insurance that used to cover her whole family got restructured into something that covers almost nothing. Before the retirement fund she'd been paying into for 2 decades got frozen. Before she started sleeping in her car. I want you to sit with that for a second. A woman who has worked full-time for 23 years, who showed up early, stayed late, never complained, did everything right. She finishes her shift, walks out to the employee parking garage, and that's where she lives now. Not because she doesn't have a job, because her job doesn't pay enough, because rent in Las Vegas has exploded past $1,600 a month, because the raises stopped coming years ago, because the tips that used to supplement her income have dried up along with the tourists. She works, and she's homeless. That's not a contradiction anymore. That's just Las Vegas in 2025. Maria told me something I haven't been able to get out of my head. She said she used to tell her daughter that hard work gets you somewhere in America, that if you show up and do your job and treat people right, you'll be okay. Maybe not rich, but okay. Safe. Stable. She said she can't tell her daughter that anymore because she doesn't believe it. Because she's living proof that it isn't true. I asked her why she stays. Why not leave Vegas? Go somewhere cheaper. Start over. She looked at me like I'd asked the dumbest question in the world. She said, "With what? I don't have first and last month's rent saved up. I don't have money for a moving truck. I don't have anything except this car and this job that's killing me. I'm trapped here." Trapped. That word keeps coming up. The casinos are trapped by their debt. The city is trapped by its dependence on gaming revenue. And the workers are trapped by an economy that was supposed to lift them up and instead has locked them in a cage. Maria isn't alone. I need you to understand that. She's not an anomaly, not an outlier, not some tragic exception to an otherwise functioning system. She is the system. There are thousands of Marias, tens of thousands. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says the average wage for a hotel casino worker in Nevada is somewhere between $16 and $17 an hour. Sounds almost reasonable, right? Until you do the math. $17 an hour, 40 hours a week. That's $680 before taxes. After taxes, maybe $550, $2,200 a month if you're lucky enough to get full-time hours, which almost nobody is anymore. Because full-time means benefits. And benefits cost money. And when you're hemorrhaging $500,000 a day, the first thing you cut is anything that helps your workers survive. So most of them are getting 25 hours a week now, 30 if they're lucky, which means $1,200 a month, maybe 13. Rent is $1,600. You see the problem. You see why the parking lots of strip casinos have become campgrounds. Why the break rooms have become places where people cry when they think no one's watching. Why the employee turnover rate has become almost meaningless because the people who leave have nowhere to go and the people who stay are just waiting for their number to come up in the next round of cuts. I talked to a bartender named James. 15 years behind the bar at a casino I'm not going to name. A good bartender, the kind who remembers your drink, remembers your name, makes you feel like you're the only person in the room even when the room is packed. He used to clear $100 in tips on a slow night, $250 on a good one. That was the magic of Vegas bartending. The hourly wage was almost irrelevant, a formality. The real money came from the customers, from the high rollers who'd drop a 20 for every drink, from the regulars who took care of you because you took care of them. That economy is dead. James told me he's lucky to make $40 in tips now, not because he got worse at his job, because there's no one at the bar, because the customers who still come are watching every penny. Because the high rollers have moved on to Macau or Monaco or anywhere that doesn't feel like a desperate shakedown the moment you walk through the door. $40 for 8 hours of work, that's $5 an hour in tips. Add it to his base wage and he's making maybe $22 an hour, which sounds almost livable until you remember that he used to make that in 15 minutes during the boom. He's 53 years old. He has a bad knee from standing on concrete for a decade and a half. He has no retirement savings because the tips that were supposed to become retirement savings never got saved. They went to rent, to his kids' braces, to keeping an old car running because public transportation in Vegas is a joke. He told me he lies awake at night doing math. How many more years until he physically can't do this job? How much he'd need to save to survive those years? How impossible those numbers are. He said, "I gave this city everything, and it used me up, and now it's getting ready to throw me away." That's not bitterness talking. That's just observation, because James sees what's coming. He watches the floor every night, counts the empty seats, tracks which tables get shut down early, notices which of his coworkers disappear and don't come back. He knows he's on borrowed time. They all do. There's a union in Las Vegas, the Culinary Workers Union, one of the most powerful labor organizations in the country. They've fought for these workers for decades, won contracts that used to mean something, but even the union is running out of moves. Their statement from last month read like a eulogy. Las Vegas isn't the American dream anymore, it's a fight for survival. That's not negotiating language. That's not the kind of thing you say when you think you're winning. That's the language of people watching a building burn and realizing the fire department isn't coming. And the fire is spreading, because here's what happens when casino workers stop earning. They stop spending, and when they stop spending, every other business that depends on them starts dying too. The restaurants where dealers grab dinner after their shifts, closing. The childcare centers that watched workers' kids during those late nights, shuttering. The auto shops that kept their cars running, laying off mechanics. The grocery stores, the laundromats, the little businesses that don't make headlines but form the actual fabric of a functioning community. All of them starving. Because the money that used to circulate through this city, the tips and wages and overtime that flowed from casinos into the local economy and then back around again, that circulation has stopped. The blood isn't pumping anymore. And when the blood stops pumping, the extremities die first. Which is exactly what's happening in the neighborhoods 3 miles from the strip. The ones tourists never see. For sale signs spreading like a rash. Foreclosure notices taped to doors. Families loading everything they own into U-Hauls and heading somewhere, anywhere. Phoenix, Texas, places that aren't this. The population of Clark County, where Vegas sits, grew every single year for decades. It's not growing anymore. For the first time since anyone started counting, more people are leaving Las Vegas than arriving. They're not leaving because they want to. They're leaving because they have to. Because there's nothing left for them here. Because the city they built has decided they're expendable. I drove through one of these neighborhoods last month, East Las Vegas, past the pawn shops and the payday lenders, into the residential streets where the workers live. Lived. Every third house had a sign in the yard. For sale. For sale. Foreclosure. For sale. The ones that were occupied had bars on the windows. Cars that hadn't moved in weeks. Yards turning brown because no one has money for water bills anymore. I stopped at a convenience store, the kind of place that used to be packed. Workers grabbing coffee before the early shift. Kids buying snacks after school. Empty. The guy behind the counter told me business is down 60%. He said, everyone's gone, and the ones who stayed don't have money to spend on anything except rent, if they can even make that. He's thinking about closing. His father opened that store in 1987. Almost 40 years of family history, and it's going to end, not because he did anything wrong, but because the economy that supported it was hollowed out by people who will never know his name, never know the store existed, never face a single consequence for what they've done. This is the human wreckage. Not numbers on a spreadsheet, not talking points in an earnings call. Real people, real families. Real lives being crushed under the weight of decisions made in boardrooms by executives who have never cleaned a hotel room, never stood behind a bar for 8 hours, never lain awake at night doing math that doesn't add up. Maria sleeping in her car. James watching the clock run out on his career. A convenience store owner about to close his father's legacy. Thousands of foreclosures. Tens of thousands of broken dreams. A city that was supposed to be the place where anyone could make it, where hard work and a little luck could change your life. That city is dying, and the people dying with it, they're not the ones who killed it. But here's the thing that haunts me, the thing I keep coming back to. Vegas isn't special. I mean, it is. The scale, the spectacle, the specific flavor of catastrophe unfolding on the Strip. That's uniquely Vegas. But the mechanics? The private equity extraction, the debt loading, the premiumization that squeezes customers until they stop coming, the abandonment of workers the moment they become inconvenient. That's not Vegas. That's America. And what's happening here right now? The collapse we're watching in real time? It's not staying here. It's a preview, a warning, a prophecy for every city, every industry, every community that depends on tourism or hospitality or entertainment. For every place that thought it was too big to fail, too important to be abandoned, too essential to be sacrificed on the altar of short-term profits. Vegas thought that too, and now it's burning. $500,000 a day. And if you live anywhere that looks even a little bit like this city, any economy built on visitors and service workers and the belief that people will keep showing up, what comes next should terrify you, because whatever's heading for Vegas, it's already heading your way. I need to tell you something that might be hard to hear. Vegas deserves this. Not the workers, not Maria sleeping in her car, not James watching his life savings evaporate one empty bar shift at a time, not the families being pushed out of neighborhoods they built with their own hands. They don't deserve any of this. But Vegas? The idea of Vegas? The machine that was supposed to be too big to fail? It earned this collapse. Every single decision that led here was a choice. The debt loading, the price gouging, the systematic extraction of value from customers and workers alike, the arrogant assumption that people would keep coming no matter how badly they were treated, choices made by people who knew better, who had the data, who saw the warning signs, and chose short-term profit over long-term survival every single time. So yes, Vegas deserves what's happening to it. But here's the thing, here's the part that should keep you awake tonight. Vegas isn't special. I know I keep saying that. I know it sounds like a rhetorical device, a writer's trick to make the story feel bigger, but I need you to really hear it this time, because everything that killed Las Vegas is happening everywhere, right now, in cities, you know, in industries you depend on, maybe in your own hometown. Let's talk about Orlando, the house that Mickey built, 75 million visitors a year, theme parks that print money, hotels that have been sold out since before you were born. Sounds invincible, right? Look closer. Disney has raised ticket prices 14 times in the last decade. A single day at Magic Kingdom now costs over $200. A family of 4 can easily spend $5,000 on a trip that used to cost $1,500. And the crowds? Still coming, for now. But the composition is changing. The middle-class families who used to visit every few years are being priced out, replaced by wealthy tourists who come once, spend big, and never return. Sound familiar? The repeat visitor rate at Disney World has dropped by 19% since 2019. 19%. That's not a blip. That's the same disease that killed Vegas, just a few years behind on the timeline. Let's talk about Miami. The new Vegas, they call it. Billionaires flooding in. Luxury condos rising like glass monuments to wealth. Hotels that charge $400 a night for a room that would have been $150 a decade ago. The service workers who make that city function, they're commuting 2 hours each way because they can't afford to live within 50 miles of the beaches they clean. The local restaurants that used to give Miami its flavor, closing, replaced by chains that can absorb the rent increases. The soul of the city being auctioned off one neighborhood at a time. Nashville, Austin, New Orleans, anywhere that became a destination. The same playbook. Raise prices, squeeze visitors, replace experiences with extraction, assume the party will never end. And when it ends? When the visitors stop coming and the debt comes due and the workers can't survive, the people who made those decisions will be long gone, cashed out, moved on, extracting value from the next city, the next industry, the next community that hasn't yet learned what happens when you let short-term thinking drive long-term strategy. This is how it works now. This is the American business model in 2025. Not building, extracting. Not growing, harvesting. Not investing in tomorrow. Liquidating today. And Vegas isn't the first victim. It's just the most visible, the canary in the coal mine that's finally stopped singing. Because here's the math that nobody wants to confront. The American middle class. The people who built Vegas with their vacation dollars. Who funded Disney with their family trips. Who kept every tourist economy in this country alive. They're tapped out. Consumer debt has crossed $17 trillion. That's not a typo. 17 trillion. Credit card balances alone are over $1 trillion, the highest in history. With average interest rates pushing 23%, the savings rate has collapsed to under 4%, which means for every $100 the average American earns, they're putting away less than 4, down from over 30% during COVID, down from 12% just 2 years ago. The cushion is gone, the buffer has been spent, and when there's no cushion, there's no vacation. There's no weekend in Vegas, no trip to Orlando, no anniversary in Miami. There's just survival, just making rent, just trying to get to next month without something breaking. This is who Vegas was counting on. This is who every tourist economy in America was counting on. A middle class with money to spend. And that middle class, it's not coming back. Not because they don't want to, because they can't. Because they've been squeezed by the same forces that squeezed Vegas. Rising costs, stagnant wages, debt piled on top of debt, the customers and the workers. It turns out they're the same people, and they're all drowning. So where does that leave Vegas? Where does that leave any city that built its future on the assumption that Americans would always have money to blow? I'll tell you where it leaves them. Desperate. There's a meeting that happens every quarter in Las Vegas. Not the public ones. Not the investor calls with their carefully scripted optimism and their phrases about managing through transitional periods. The real meetings, behind closed doors. City officials, casino executives, union leaders, real estate developers, all of them staring at the same projections. All of them running the same scenarios. All of them asking the same question. What do we do? And the answer keeps coming back the same. Double down. That's literally the strategy. If the current bets aren't paying off, make bigger bets. More spectacle, more investment, more massive projects designed to grab headlines and attract the wealthy visitors who can still afford to come. That's how we got the Sphere. $2.3 billion, the most expensive entertainment venue ever built. A glowing orb of LED screens and architectural hubris rising from the desert like a monument to desperation. It's beautiful, I'll give them that. Standing in front of it at night, watching the images ripple across its surface, you almost forget what's happening to this city. Almost, because the Sphere has a problem. Actually, it has several problems. First, it needs to sell millions of tickets every single year just to break even, in a city where visitor numbers are collapsing, where the people who do come are spending less and staying shorter, where every dollar is a fight. Millions of tickets, every year, forever. Second, it's hemorrhaging money at a rate that makes the casino losses look modest. Bloomberg reported that the Sphere's parent company is burning through cash so fast that analysts are openly questioning whether it survives the next 2 years. 2 years. That's the timeline. That's how long this glittering monument to ambition might have before it becomes the world's most expensive bankruptcy. And then there's Formula One, the Grand Prix that was supposed to cement Vegas as a global destination, bring the European elite, the Asian billionaires, the people for whom money is not an object. You know what actually happened? Local residents called it a hostage situation. The entire city gridlocked for days. Residents trapped in their neighborhoods. Businesses losing money because customers couldn't reach them. Tourists who paid $1,000 a night to be stuck in traffic instead of gambling. It was a disaster. Not the race itself. The race was fine. Cars went fast. Rich people watched. But the aftermath, the promises that didn't pan out, the economic impact that was supposed to justify the chaos, it never materialized. The restaurants that were supposed to be packed, half empty. The casinos that were supposed to overflow, saw barely a blip. The grand strategy of pivoting Vegas toward the ultra-wealthy, it doesn't work. Because there aren't enough ultra-wealthy people in the world to fill a city built for 40 million middle-class visitors. The math doesn't scale. It was never going to scale. And everyone who approved these projects knew that. They did it anyway. Because when you're trapped, you gamble. That's what Vegas knows better than anyone. When the walls are closing in and the debt is crushing you and there's no clear path to survival, you throw the dice one more time. Hoping this time will be different. Hoping the numbers will finally come up in your favor. But the house always wins. And in this case, the house is reality. And reality is undefeated. So what happens now? What happens when the Sphere can't fill seats? When the next round of casino bankruptcies triggers the contagion we talked about? When the tax revenue that funds schools and roads and police departments craters below the point of sustainability? I'll tell you what happens. What always happens, the people at the top will be fine. The executives will trigger their golden parachutes. The private equity firms will restructure, extract what's left, and move on. The investors will write off their losses and find the next opportunity. They'll be fine. They're always fine. And everyone else? Maria will lose her job entirely, not just her hours, her job. James will discover that a 53-year-old bartender with a bad knee is unemployable in a city with no bars left to tend. The neighborhoods 3 miles from the strip will hollow out completely, become ghost towns, become cautionary tales that future urban planners study to understand how not to build a city. And the strip itself, the neon will go dark, not all at once. That's not how these things happen. One casino at a time. First the smaller ones, the ones you've never heard of, then the mid-tier properties, then eventually, inevitably, the giants, the names that defined Las Vegas for a century. Dark, empty, monuments to a dream that ate itself alive. I started this story on a casino floor, 2 in the morning, the machine still singing, the lights still blazing, the air still cold and artificial and pumped full of that manufactured scent designed to keep you awake and spending. Let me take you back there. Same floor, same time, same everything, except now you see it differently. Now you understand what you're looking at. Those empty chairs aren't just empty chairs. They're missing customers who are never coming back. Those silent tables aren't just silent, they're costing money. Every second, every minute. That dealer standing at attention behind pristine felt, she doesn't know if she'll have a job next month. That slot machine singing its digital song, it's playing for no one. And above it all, the lights, still blazing, always blazing. Because Vegas can't afford to admit the truth, can't afford to dim the neon, can't afford to show even a hint of the decay spreading through its foundations. So it burns. $500,000 a day to maintain an illusion that fewer and fewer people believe, to keep the facade intact while the structure crumbles, to pretend for one more day that the music hasn't stopped. But it has stopped, and everyone knows it. The executives know it. The workers know it. The city officials know it. The tourists who used to come every year and now cross Vegas off their list know it. Even you know it now. This isn't a crisis. Crises end. This is an unraveling, a slow collapse. A city discovering what happens when you sacrifice your soul for short-term profit. When you treat your customers like marks, your workers like expenses, your future like someone else's problem. Vegas asked a question for 50 years. What happens here? And for 50 years, the answer was magic, dreams, possibility, a place where anyone could become someone, where luck was real and the lights never dimmed. That's not the answer anymore. What happens in Vegas? Abandonment, extraction, betrayal, and now, collapse. $500,000 a day, burning, and tomorrow it will be worse. Vegas isn't asking for sympathy. It doesn't deserve it. But it is offering something, a warning. Because what happens in Vegas, it doesn't stay in Vegas. Not anymore. It never did. The same forces, the same greed, the same short-term thinking. It's everywhere. In your city, your industry, your economy, and whatever comes next for Las Vegas. Whatever final chapter gets written for the entertainment capital of the world, it's already heading your way. The only question is whether you'll see it coming, or whether you'll wake up one morning, look around at the empty chairs, the silent tables, the blazing lights with no one left to watch them, and realize you're living in the sequel.